Welcome to Anomic Comics. My name is Dane. I'm here with Willow from the channel Questing Refuge.
Hey,
So we're going to be talking about the two Pride books from Marvel and DC. They each put out a Pride book this month, and yeah, we read through them, and we're going to talk about what we think and a little bit about representation. And then toward the end, we'll do we're going to be doing a little theorizing about the character of Sylvie from the Loki show.
a lot of exciting stuff. I'm like really looking forward to this.
Good times.
Yeah, I mean, might as well jump into I guess what would you overall think of the DC book? Like just overall.
I was surprised by the DC book. I'll be honest, because I am biased towards Marvel. I'll be the first to admit that. And I don't think that's just based completely on subjective things, because I do think that DC tends to not be the first in line to do progressive ideas, and they tend to follow suit whenever Marvel does something and things like that. So I kind of was expecting it to be more of a cynical, like, oh shit, Marvel's doing one, we better do one. But it was not that. Like I just within the first page of the DC book, I was like, okay, I think I was wrong,
Oh
because
yeah, it opened strong. It really did.
it's yeah, the first story is incredibly strong. It's written by James Tynion.
Yeah, the wrong side of the looking glass
Yeah,
with Batwoman, and that was fantastic. Great opening story.
and then just amazing freaking art by Trung Lee Win. I'd never
Yes,
seen their art before, but
it
wow,
fit that story so well. Um, yeah, I love that one.
it had almost like a dreamlike quality. And considering Kate Kane is kind of looking back at her childhood and like how she felt different being a little girl, like she couldn't do the quote unquote girl things that girls are quote unquote supposed to do, and her friend could do it, and she always kind of resented that or whatever. But that's because she's a big old lesbian. Um,
Yeah, there was so many layers to that one. Oh man, yeah, the art was great. Like it really fit like the kind of the Alice in Wonderland
yeah,
kind of feel to it. It was just yeah, absolutely fantastic. I really liked that one a lot. Um, and yeah, like you said, like just the way she talked about like because it was like this weird mix of like I don't even know if I'd say resentment for her friend. It was this weird mix of feelings. It felt like, and it came across great. I thought, whereas there's like it was like a fond memories of a friend but hated this one kind of game because there was a sadness there and talking about
yeah,
how she was from like the broken side and
yeah.
it was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of projected resentment on there a little bit, maybe from like I've had a couple of lesbian friends who kind of expressed their not as they got older, of course. They it's a good idea to work that stuff out when you get older, but like when you're younger, teenager and stuff, and you see you still are trying to make yourself fit into this mold or whatever, and you look around and see that other people seemingly do it so easy. I'm
oh
sure
yeah,
it caused some resentment feelings. Uh, but
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I definitely think there's resentment intermixed in there. It was just like I said, it's just amazing. There was such a mix of emotions that were portrayed with that. I guess it just I don't know. It really hell it resonated with me from a completely different experience in a way.
yeah,
Right? It was a very strong story.
yeah. I mean, and that's a testament to how powerful it is, because I'm a guy and not a lesbian, and like none of that stuff. I didn't have those experiences being a little girl or whatever, but there's definitely something there that I think most people could connect to, whether it's about sexuality or gender or just not fitting in general. I think it's a pretty universal story, oddly.
Yeah. The lines about not fitting in really hit hard. There were some really good lines in there about that. I don't know. Yeah, the whole story was just fantastic.
Um, so yeah, let's
Yeah, I feel like that really set the tone for the DC one. Like, we just went in. I was like, because I same thing. I read the Marvel one first, and then had less expectations. I think going into the DC one, and it just started really strong, like just art wise and everything about it. And just yeah, it was consistently. I was really surprised by the DC one in general. It was all very good.
hopping over to the Marvel Pride book. It's called Marvel Voices Pride #1. They've been doing this series Voices for about a year or more now, where I think the first one that I remember, maybe the first one was about African American voices. So it was like just a bunch of African American characters from Marvel with African American creators working on it, and that
Cool.
was really cool. They've done a Native American one. They've done, I think the last one they did was Asian American or Asian American before the Pride one. So, they're putting out these one shots that are like big collections, and I think it's a cool series. It's a good way, I think, to get casual people to check out these comics and maybe get familiar with these characters that, sadly aren't as popular as a lot of the characters that we know, but maybe that'll be changing soon. Um,
Yeah. I mean, definitely for me, there's definitely some reading through this, I'm now much more curious about of like, hey, because I only know a lot of the main ones. And there was a number, I mean, both the books really, I guess, that definitely got me curious. I'm like, oh, I'm really curious. And it was interesting because even stories that didn't necessarily have a lot going on, just the way the characters acted or interacted, got me really curious right off the bat, I guess. So
yeah,
it was really cool. It was a fun read.
it's like, even like you said, there are stories where it's not quite as exciting as some of the stuff in the DC book, but even still, like the quieter moments, it says a lot about community, I think, and just
Oh yeah,
support for other queer people, and how important, like, just necessary that stuff is. So, um,
yeah. So, some of the Marvel moments that were my favorite in this were like actually like two of my favorite stories weren't even necessarily focused. Like there were heroes, obviously, but they weren't even necessarily directly focused on heroes. Like I really love the Totally Invulnerable with the She-Hulk cosplay and the scientist from Immortal Hulk. Like both those stories were fantastic.
yeah,
Um, and so there were a lot of really good, like just human moments in the Marvel one. I felt like, and uh, I really appreciated too. Like there were certain ones that were just very wholesome.
yeah.
Like there were some very hard hitting ones about like how hard it is, but there was just some that were just very wholesome. So I really like the range that we didn't see kind of like a pity story or stuff like that. Like there was a very large range of things, and like you said, like community, and there's just a lot of great things going on.
Well, just here's a quick summary. Let's see. Marvel Voices Pride #1 honors Pride Month with our first ever queer-centered special spotlighting Marvel's growing tapestry of LGBTQ plus characters. Um, let's see. It explores the history of LGBTQ plus inclusion and storytelling at Marvel Comics. The first story is really good as a good primer for the book, right? Because it's this character prodigy who essentially has, memory of a computer, and he can access all kinds of data and files and everything like that. So it's kind of him giving a recap of like inclusion and queer representation up until that point. Prodigy and Speed are a couple, and they've actually been getting more popular. Speed, by the way, the silver haired dude,
Okay.
uh, he is one of those little kids from WandaVision.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
he's one of Wanda's children,
Oh,
who
interesting.
was not real at first, but then some comic book shenanigans happened and the kids became real.
Which who knows? Is
Comics.
that well? We don't know. We know there's something going on there. So
Yeah, it was written by Kieran Gillen. Very talented writer. He's written some really cool indie stuff as well. He said about it, I didn't think I'd ever write these two again or any of the Young Avengers kids. But when editor Sarah Brunstead asked me to write a story, this little slice of life and slice of pizza story just burst into my head. Back over at DC, the second story was Try the Girl, with the character of The Question, who's been, an out lesbian in DC Comics for several years now. I think maybe longer than a lot of characters at Marvel. I'm not sure, but
I had a lot of questions about the question
yeah,
because I found that story. That was an example where I had a hard time pointing to what it was about that story, but I just found it very compelling. And both the characters, I actually looked up like, hey, who's this? Is this Valeria person really important? That she's, like I. So it was one of the few where I felt compelled to try to look some stuff up because I was just like, I don't know, it was really great. The all of it, the style. I love the like kind of detective style going on.
yep.
The
That's
character design and just the interactions, all the characters. It was fantastic.
That's the question for you. Like, so you might not be aware of this. It's kind of tangential, but Watchmen. Originally, Alan Moore wanted to be able to write. Like he was trying to. If you think about Watchmen, the characters are analogs for the main DC characters, right? So
Okay.
Doctor Manhattan is basically Superman or Captain Atom, and then Night Owl is basically Batman. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so Rorschach okay. So here's what happened. He asked if DC can I use them, Batman. They're like, no, you can't do that crazy story with our main characters, but there are these other characters. There was a publisher called Charleston back in the day that DC ended up buying whenever they folded, and they had their own kind of Justice League type-ish characters. They said, you can use these. So he took all those characters, and then Rorschach is actually the analog for the Question. The Question used to be a man in DC Comics, and then Renee
Okay.
Montoya, who has been a detective in Gotham City in the comics for a long time, ended up becoming the Question. So,
Nice.
yeah, none of that has anything to do with Pride Month or anything, but it's interesting backstory. She's been a lesbian in there for a long time, so it's not anything recent, and it's cool to see them continuing that on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, great chemistry with the character. She saves, who I suspect there's more to her. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, it was just just I
I
don't know.
liked the lipstick on the mask. That was cool.
Yes, that was fantastic. Yeah. The ending kiss and then this one, the lipstick. That was great. Like she looked, even though she's just wearing this like wrap of a mask, it still managed to like portray this kind of look of like, um,
Surprise almost, or like,
yeah,
yeah,
you're like stupefied or
yeah.
something. It was great. Just great.
The second story at Marvel was starring the character of Karma, who is a mutant X-Men character. It was also written by Vita Ayala, as was the okay. Vita Ayala wrote stories for both books,
Oh, nice.
so it wasn't one of my favorite ones. I like some of the interactions with the other characters and stuff, but
Yeah, same. It was like I was very interested in Karma. I made a note of that. Like I really and it was very, again, a very wholesome one. Um, but like personally, it probably was like not quite as compelling to me overall. But like I did enjoy the characters. Like
it was
so
just
yeah,
a really simple story. Like she's nervous
yeah,
about asking this other chick to dance, and then she finally does, and she's like excited to dance with her, and it's just a little anecdote about like have a little
yeah.
confidence in yourself. You know what I mean? We got another word for a truck to move your furniture, which
Oh, by
was
that was with Harley and Ivy,
yep.
which was nice. That was a nice little. I like the art in it, and it was a sweet, like fun. It was like sweet and fun. Like it didn't
Yeah.
have a lot going on, but it
It actually, I thought it was kind of a big moment because like they don't tend to talk about their relationship much, and that's the same way in the animated show as you just started watching. You'll see as you go along, like they clearly have feelings for each other. They clearly, like things happen, but then they neither one of them are comfortable talking about it. So it kind of just like as you'll see in the show too, the cartoon, like because of that dynamic, things end up going a weird, not ideal direction. You know what I
right.
mean? Because they're just not communicating directly about the situation, and so that was why it was actually kind of a cool thing to see. Like they didn't want to use the word relationship, right? Like that was the big word in that
Oh
story.
yeah, and it had actually, I forgot, like I was trying to look for the screenshot I took of it because I found that there was a panel or two that was super compelling to me.
Was
Just
it the
hit
Harley
hard.
line when she talks about her
Yes.
experience with relationships?
Yeah, like just I don't ever want to, like, relationships can be used as oppression. I don't ever want to oppress you. And it was, oh my god, just
That
beautiful.
that's
Like
yeah,
hit me really hard.
that's a huge thing because you know where she learned that, right? Like,
Yeah.
and the fact that they've managed to take Harley and separate her from the Joker like this is actually super cool because I remember like several years ago, before even Suicide Squad, the movie and stuff, where that kind of began.
Okay.
There probably still are. There's a lot of people that like love their Joker and Harley's relationship, and they're like
Uh
relationship goals and stuff. And I'm like, you realize That's not good. You don't want that relationship.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see both in the show I just started and that. So I mean, yeah, actually, that comic reminded me like, oh yeah, I want to check that show out, which I'm loving. So, but yeah, that panel like hit me really hard. I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful line. Because it's so true, right? Like it can be such a trap. People will use that. And you know, if you're like Harley, who has like this kind of messed up past, like I know for me, right? Like I definitely would fall into relationships where like yeah, it was you were leaning on it too much as a part of your like defining thing.
Yep.
And so yeah, that was really relatable and just a really really powerful moment. So yeah, that was an awesome uh panel. Just kind of snuck away in this like I said, the rest of it was just kind of this fun, wholesome, cutesy like thing with Harley and Ivy. And but yeah, that like page was just like, oh wow, that hit me.
Back over at Marvel, we have the Iceman story, which I actually really, really loved.
Oh my god, that was fantastic.
The fact that Magneto is the one that like sat down with him, and you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
It's really, really good. And he was like he had showed up to like assault the mansion and whatnot, and then he's like, "Oh wait, this little gay kid's upset. I better." But no, so the interesting, maybe kind of confusing thing about Iceman and his sexuality is that, and it kind of talks about this, but a little more context. So Iceman was not gay canonically until just a few years ago, really, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Okay.
But he was one of the original X-Men from the 60s. In the comics, there's all this continuity of him being straight and trying to date women and dating women and having girlfriends and stuff like that. At one point, Beast went back in time to the early days of the X-Men, the original 5 X-Men, because he just felt like everything had gone so far off the rails from what Professor X's dream originally was. Things had gotten so crazy, like Jean Grey was dead, and Cyclops had basically become this militant revolutionary rather than the leader for the dream that Professor X had, and everything was just so messed up that Beast was like, if I go back in time and bring the original versions of us to the future and show them what became of us, maybe they can go back and prevent all this from happening, right? Like you can
Right.
send them back with the knowledge of everything, and then maybe they can change how things go. Well, they ended up getting trapped. He brought the original 5 X-Men when they're, brand new X-Men. They're still learning their powers, essentially. They're kids, and brings them to the future or present. And they ended up staying for several years in the comics and being their own X-Men team and having their own
Huh.
adventures, sometimes side by side with their modern contemporaries. And eventually they went back, right? But when they went back, all of their memories merged with the modern versions, right? So basically, what happened was Iceman he didn't figure out he was gay until he was in like his 20s or something. But because they were able to merge their memories, he basically saved himself retroactively from having to live straight all that time because
Okay.
his younger self learned earlier that he's actually gay, right? Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
That makes sense too because I this is another one I looked up a little bit of stuff because I found this one so compelling. It sounded like this was a re-envisioned like historical comic or something where like this comic happened before, but this time it played out completely different because
yeah.
and I just thought that was really cool. Yeah, just a really cool appearance of Magneto too. It was just a great moment. Yeah.
Oh, this is actually a really cool quote from the writer Anthony Oliveira. He says, "I've been reading Marvel comics since I was a painfully shy, painfully closeted kid, and I always recognized in Iceman's long struggle something of my own. When he tried to come out to his friends and couldn't, when his home life was difficult and closed off, when he blanketed his world in snow instead of confronting what was wrong, it always felt like Bobby and I were finding our way together. I wanted to honor that history and these characters who made a lonely queer kid feel less alone." Then we got Clothes Makeup Gift in the DC book. This by Danny Lore and Lisa Sturl.
I love
Uh,
this one. This is up there with one of my favorites. I think it's just a fun, wholesome one. I guess it had a strong like neurodivergent vibe, like ADHD or something going on, with like trying to keep track of the list that fit really well for the Flash.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is just yeah. So it was a very like quirky, fun one. So yeah, I don't know. I love that
Okay, yeah, this
aspect
was
of it.
the Flash from the future is who this is. So this is they've been doing a thing in DC called Future State, where they're
Okay.
giving a glimpse into a possible future of the DC universe. And so I guess this is the I haven't read much of it, so I guess this is the Flash that they introduced recently.
It was the only character who felt like more well, not the only one, maybe, but like I said, just very openly quirky. So it just had that kind of like, oh, cool, we have like a neurodivergent queer character. Like that's what it felt like.
The next Marvel story was starring Daken and Somnus, which Somnus, I believe, that was the first appearance of that character.
Yeah, that was the resurrection, right?
Yep, yep. That was so. Yeah, you've seen your first Krakoan resurrection now.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I like that story quite a bit too. It was a very interesting dynamic of this kind of fear of relationship and stuff, and combined with the identity switch, and yeah, it definitely just had me curious about the characters. Like it felt like a sneak peek
Yeah,
of a lot of interesting stuff there.
Daken, by the way, is Wolverine's estranged son. Um,
Oh, I was wondering because yeah, I noticed he had like very
the
like
claws.
Wolverine like powers. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a pretty cool story. Looking more forward to more from Somnus. It's a cool costume too.
yeah, it's a neat name too. Let's see. I mean, I guess I might as well bring up the big one, which I think was a favorite for both of us. Was the Be Gay Do Crime.
Yeah, that
Uh,
was incredible. I remember when they had announced the book and they announced the titles of some of the stories, and I was like, really? They're calling a story that? Okay. And but at first, going into it, I wasn't expecting it to really reflect that, but it did, and it actually, like
yeah,
it kind of explored it in a pretty cool way.
it
Um,
really did. It had a lot of um, I don't know. It was great. Like just both the characters were compelling. And it was this very cool kind of like having a younger generation holding the older generation accountable, and the older generation being like, you know what? All right, you're right, but let's do this a different way, and I'm gonna help you. And I don't know. It was really great.
yeah,
Um,
it was written by Cena Grace. So Pied Piper is a Flash character, and he's a gay dude. In the story, he comes across a younger copycat named Drummer Boy, who's doing crimes to help his community. So
yeah,
it was cool because like basically Drummer Boy kind of dressed Pied Piper down a little bit. Like, yeah, you used to be cool and all, but you don't really help the people in your community. You don't, you know what I mean? And by the end of it, Pied
yeah,
Piper was like, "You're right. You're right. I've gotten, more or less expressing. I've been detached. I've gotten busy doing this other stuff or whatever, and I've kind of lost."
yeah. They even threw in like some cluster, like where they had the bouge
Yeah,
for,
the
and they had the little
bouge.
note that's bourgeois, and was like, you basically got your money, you got your condos or rentals or whatever, you don't care anymore. It was really cool. I mean, it felt like a fairly short story even, but it just hit all the points. And yeah, like you said, just fantastic for the name too. Yeah, this is absolutely great.
See, back over at Marvel, we got some more mutant stuff. This one was really surprising because I knew it was going to have a Mystique and Destiny story, but I didn't know it was going to take place a long time ago. Um, which I often forget that Mystique and
I don't know
Destiny.
who Destiny is.
She's currently dead in the X-Men books, which is a rare
Okay,
thing for mutants these days because, as you saw, everyone can be reborn
resurrected.
basically.
Yeah.
And so the way that they do that is that Cerebro has basically every mutant it's ever scanned has a backup copy of their entire mind. So that and then certain mutants that they have can create basically a blank shell that is a perfect genetic copy of their body. And then with Cerebro, in the backup files, right, they just put their mind back in there, and
Huh.
they're brand new. I mean, it can only be it's from wherever the last save point was, basically, of their mind. But yeah.
Right.
So, but the thing is, right now, because Destiny's power is that she sees the future. And
Okay.
when this House of X, Powers of X thing happened, which you have that book, you'll learn about it when you read it. It's a very clear thing that they set up whenever they build the island of Krakoa, and they're like, all right, this is the new mutant thing. This is new paradigm. But one of the main rules is nobody that can see the future is allowed to live on Krakoa, and
Oh,
that's
interesting.
it's a point of contention, and rightfully so. And the story is addressing it as a point of contention as well,
Oh, interesting.
because
Okay.
essentially the thing is Krakoa is for all mutants. That's what they said. Except over time we found out these little exceptions here and there. They were like, well, no, we can't have anyone who can see the future because we don't want anyone to be able to, you know, predict what we're going to do and stop us from doing it or anything like that. Now, Mystique and Destiny have
Right.
been lovers for a long, long time, and they've been promising Mystique since. In that book you have, once you read it, you'll see where they promise her, if you do these things for us, Professor X and Magneto and such, right? They're like, if you do this stuff for us, we'll bring her back. We promise. You just got to do these things for us. So they've
Oh,
basically
wow.
been using Mystique to do all kinds of shit, and they still refuse to actually bring Destiny back.
Wow. Okay, that explains. There's a random panel I think that just shows her screaming, "Give me my wife back,"
Right.
but it's out of context. So like
Yep.
that's okay. I love the story. Um, again, just I mean, I vaguely know Mystique, but it was
Yeah.
just a cool. I really liked there was some line about like basically how they always had to fight and just something like we have to enjoy every moment we're not at war is for
Yeah.
each other or something like that. It was just a beautiful line. Yeah, I really like that one. But that's really cool knowing the additional context of like just wow.
Yep. And that was written by Teenie Howard. She's done some amazing, like she's a relatively new writer at Marvel, but she's done some amazing stuff just right off the bat. Excalibur was great. This is the 40th anniversary of Irene Adler, aka the mutant precognitive known as Destiny. Yeah, and it's as they say, it's a really heartbreaking part of Krakoa's story right now. Like overall, it's a very triumphant time for mutants. Like there's probably never been a time in comics where the mutants are doing so well and they're like, you know, commanding respect and seizing power without taking it from anyone, essentially. Like they're creating their own power, essentially, which
Right.
is really pissing people off. Um, but then you know, like you over time you find out these little things that they're doing that are kind of like,
Yeah, that's not
okay,
great.
this isn't as ideal as you made it out to be. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
um,
I guess I'm gonna bring up the date night story, which had Dreamer,
yeah,
which I found, like I said, it was another story where we just were seeing a cool character, having a cool, fight some bad guys quick to get to her date, and yeah, so made me look up a bunch of stuff because I just like, oh, it's a really cool character. I like the design and just the interaction and how stuff she talked about. I think it really I really love some lines about kind of like how hard she was trying to protect others from even knowing that there was stuff going on. Like I want to give you this freedom of peace of mind. And I found that kind of I want people to have hope and peace of mind a really cool thing. I think that resonated in me and just made me want to look up about the character. Um yeah, it was really good. And then finding out to like, oh hey, wow, like this character apparently in the show was actually played by a trans woman who's been through some stuff, and so that was really cool finding out like this whole history. Yeah, just really neat.
yeah. Nicole Maines, the stuff she's been through. It was Doe versus Regional School Unit 26. Yeah, so she sued her school district because they would not allow her access to the female bathroom, despite the fact that she is a woman. Um, and she won.
Yeah, it was like
So
the first case
that's
in
a pretty
the
big
states, I
deal.
guess, where that bathroom bullshit got shut down.
So it's like she's getting to be like, you know, she was already a literal hero, and then she's like gets to be a TV superhero, and now this is her first appearance as a comic hero, and she got to write it. That's a really really cool experience. I'd like to talk to her
Yeah,
someday.
that'd be amazing. But yeah, that just really added a whole layer of like I thought that character just was very compelling and looked up some stuff. I guess this is like daughter of the previous like dream girl. Um
Yeah, something like that.
and yeah, and so I was like, oh, this sounds fascinating. So finding out that out was like that was a real treat, I guess, to find out the history behind that and that she got to write this. That was so cool.
Back over at Marvel, we've got the story with Black Cat and Jesse Drake, which was surprising to me because I'm not sure if I knew that Black Cat was bisexual or not. Because when I was growing up in the '90s, she was always lusting after Spider-Man. Um, so I don't know if that's a more recent thing that if they've really even explored that or what. I haven't read Spider-Man comics very much in the last few years, so.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, I recognized Black Cat from probably the old cartoon or something. It's definitely familiar. I didn't know. I didn't know
Yeah.
the character too well, but it was another one where it was just uh a fun one. I thought I definitely did enjoy the interaction between those two characters. Yeah, it was just that was a really fun story. I thought overall enjoyed the art and their playfulness. The other characters' powers seemed kind of interesting. I guess like the like some sort of emotion reading and manipulation.
Hmm.
I really liked, and you had already mentioned to me, I guess, that the original Green Lantern had come out as
Oh yeah.
gay, and so I that was really cool to see that story. The He's the Light of My Life. What's the name of the story?
Yeah.
Where I guess it sounds like he was somewhat estranged from his son, and they're meeting up to talk about things, and he kind of showed his, they're meeting up at like a bar that I guess is queer owned, and it was also a place for him to kind of like secretly go to when he was younger.
Yeah.
So it was a really neat showing the history. I don't know. I just really liked that. I just thought it was a very touching story. Kind of his son coming out inspired him to be more honest. That whole line was really good. I don't know. Yeah, it was just
Yeah. I mean, it says something about a couple of things. Kind of folding, having these two characters from two very different eras that are both gay, but yeah, have had different experiences, and the father being able to learn from the son how to be more himself is pretty cool. Um,
yeah, yeah. That's right. I really like that one. So
but then there's the one with Anol, the green guy,
yes, yep.
and I think he's kind of like he's dealing with self-esteem issues because of his looks, basically.
Yeah, like I guess like his in a way like with his skin. I guess his skin is like super hard, and so then
Yeah.
like when people want to be with him, and so that was yeah, I like that one. It was another kind of sweet, wholesome one. That was quick. But it also was a cool look at Krakoa. Is that how you pronounce it?
Krakoa, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that was the first one that was in the book for me. So that was kind of my first look at that because I haven't read the House of X yet. So that was kind of neat too for that reason. Just seeing the kind of like the culture there, I guess.
It does have its own culture. It's really really cool. Like I love it so much that they just, especially as time goes on, the whole Krakoa thing, it really does become its own culture, and the way things are done and stuff like that. And yeah.
I like the Aqualad one. It was another one where it was just, kind of felt wholesome, but I really love the community feel. I guess with that one was a big part of the theme, kind of.
Was that the one where all the other gay characters showed up at the end or something like that?
Yeah, like they ran off. He thought he got left alone, and they ran off to get like everyone else. And there was this line kind of about like you never have to do anything like this alone. And that was a really cool, powerful
Yeah.
moment. So I definitely really like that.
Yeah, and I agree. And like, I'm not necessarily like deep into the queer community or anything, but I've been around and adjacent to a lot of queer people in the last couple of years, and it's pretty incredible to see the types of support and just unwavering in some cases. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's really cool, and you don't see that a lot in many other communities. So it definitely expresses something real there,
yeah,
even if it's doing it with superheroes. Yeah, then we have there's the story with North Star. Yeah, that was just a cool one, kind of like following up on like we talked about. He was the first
yeah,
character to just openly declare himself gay in Marvel Comics, and that was decades ago. And he's never been a kind of character that's constantly in comics for a long time. He was just connected to Alpha Flight and Alpha Flight was its own thing, and they would do an Alpha Flight series, and then it would kind of get canceled after a short while. It was never the type of team book that would get long running series. But you know, in the last few years, he's just been more of a X-Man, like he's a mutant, so it makes sense. But
Okay.
you know, he as a matter of fact, X-Men number 51 in 2012 was the first gay wedding in a mainstream comic book, uh, and it was between him and Kyle, the guy that's still with.
And then I think this is the last one for the DC was By the Victors, which
Oh yeah.
had Midnighter. I'm
Um,
not super familiar with. They were talking to Constantine,
oh yeah, yeah. Constantine
and
is bisexual, and then like basically he's kind of a jackass. The character's supposed to be kind of an asshole, so he's like, you know, his philosophy is basically like, do you have two legs? You know, like that's
okay, yeah, yeah,
all right. Then we can get it on, kind of thing.
yeah. It definitely had kind of some polyamory aspect to it too, because he leaves the bar and he mentions that he's like married,
Yeah.
and John's just like, yeah, bring him along.
Yep. Absolutely. And then of course, back at Marvel, we've got the uh, Daredevil / Elektra story with Dr. Charlene McGowan, which you've read Immortal Hulk, so you saw, you know, kind of her coming out moment. Um,
Yeah, that was a cool. It's really cool seeing that character. As one of my favorites, I think, in the Marvel one. Seeing that expanded upon with the trying to help trans people with the lab.
yep.
And it had a lot of it was very fun, but while managing to do a lot of nuance in that one, because there was a lot of like mistakes being made by characters,
Yeah,
and so she gets to correct them. It was a really well done, like fun way of getting into some of that, I thought.
I really appreciated the just there's like a 3 panels exchange that's like, you know, because I am a cis man. I understand the anxiety of like, what if I say something wrong to this trans person? I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to be seen as a transphobe or idiot or ignorant or anything like that. You know, it's a natural anxiety to have whenever you're not the person in that position, I think. And
Mm.
you know, especially if you're wanting to do the right thing, you're going to have some anxiety because what if you don't? And we're all, you know, everybody's going to be at a point where they need to learn, you know, and that's why I think that it was really cool, not just to have, you know, because Electra says something like "Welcome to womanhood," and
Yeah,
Charlene's like, you know, it's actually pretty condescending to say that to a trans woman because it implies that we, you know, we aren't real women unless or whatever. And well, I don't want to or whatever it, but I just didn't remember exactly what the wording was.
yeah.
Um,
It was kind of like the implication of like having to transition to be a woman.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It was really cool, especially because that line right was also kind of playing on the whole like sexism thing, the
yeah,
men not listening to her, and so it was a really good had good banter.
yeah. And
It was a really
it's
good character.
very natural comic book banter, and yet it's expressing some pretty, you know, relevant shit, like and stuff that I think that more people, you know, people like me who have anxiety over these things sometimes could learn something from. Like, you know, if a trans person says, hey, it's not really cool for you to use that phrase or whatever, you don't need to fucking get upset about it, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. Yeah.
and that's a kind of a natural impulse whenever you're embarrassed or something, is to kind of get defensive and stuff like that. And the fact that Electra is just like, oh yeah, I wasn't aware of that, I apologize, that's all it takes. That's literally all it
Yep.
takes. And you know,
Yeah.
and to do better, you know, you learn from that, and you keep moving. It doesn't make you a bad person. Electra's not a transphobe, you know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah. It had a
just
cool and even like the I love that like even the bad guy was like, oh, you know my cousin's trans,
oh
and
yeah.
that
Well,
was
but
that
then
was
the joke
fantastic.
the joke was that she actually did though.
Yeah, that she did. No, that was fantastic. Yeah, that was great.
I wasn't prepared for that. I was like, oh man, we get two little you know, cliche killers right here, and then nope, one of them was actually legit. That just kind of goes back to the whole you know, community aspect, I
Yep.
think.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like a silly moment in a way, but I really like those kind of moments. I think the little bit I've been getting into comics again, having even the villain is like respectful in that way,
Yeah.
right? Like getting it, like, so that was cool. I don't know. It was just a really, I love that one. It's probably one of my favorites in the
Uh,
Marvel book.
the implication is pretty awesome because it's like, okay, maybe I'm a supervillain, but I'm not a transphobe. Like,
Right, like yeah.
I'm not a big piece of shit or anything. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Sure, I rob banks, but like, I have limits.
Now we're just on Marvel stuff. I think that's all there is left. Because yeah, the DC one definitely had less stories, but each one kind of was given more like space, I guess. So we still have a few more.
Yeah, we're just really two. We could talk more about the cosplay She-Hulk one if you
Mhm.
want. I don't
I really love that one. I don't know.
I don't remember much what the theme was. I kind of remember. Yeah, I don't. What remember
Okay.
what it was about?
Yeah. So it was kind of this like Titania comes down. Well, I don't know this character well, really, at all.
Me either.
Other than she showed up in Immortal Hulk, so I'd seen her a little bit there,
Yeah,
and is all mad. And the way it started was really cool because it starts off like you don't really know it's not really She Hulk.
yeah,
Other than like there's this weird moment where she's like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die," and you're kind of like, "Well, how the hell is Hulk gonna die?"
yeah.
And then it's revealed that like, oh, and then they end up having this like cool like lunch. And she talks about like kind of like wanting to transition, knowing she was a woman earlier, and so wanting to put the costume on to like feel like, and I love that that was the title, like this totally invulnerable, and I really love that. Like, I just thought that was a really
Okay.
cool moment of this kind of like how you go from this very shaky feeling like we've seen in some of the other stories, like with the Batwoman one of like not fitting in and feeling very vulnerable and like you're broken, and this contrasted with the She-Hulk cosplay where it's like I felt totally invulnerable dressing up and just being me, being who I wanted to be, and I love that. It was just
It,
and
it's it's kind of like if you look at it, look at it like from the superhero allegory perspective. It's like by accepting and embracing your true self, you are gaining power, kind of thing. Like this, that is your
yeah.
power.
I guess it also has kind of like some some representation stuff in there, and it's I don't know. It was yeah, it was, like I said, it was a fairly lighthearted one, but it was just a very wholesome and enjoyable one. I really liked. Again, I think the scientists in this one were two of my favorites. I mean, I loved so many of them, but like I just was amused that like the two not hero characters were really well done
Yeah,
in these.
the Wiccan and Hulkling one.
Yeah, I liked the vow. It was a
Okay.
really short, simple one, but I liked it. It was touching.
Yeah, well, they got married in an event comic in last year. Uh,
Oh, that's right. It had the little line about how they had two ceremonies.
yeah, so it's already got to see it once, but the first one was in space, and there wasn't like a lot of people around and stuff. So, and it was kind of done like in the aftermath of a big battle where everybody was like thought they were gonna die and stuff. But yeah, Wiccan is actually the other kid that of Wanda's.
Okay. Okay.
So Wiccan
Nice.
and Speed are those two kids, Tommy and Billy, from the show, grown up.
Huh. Okay. Under the Stars. This was one that it was a simple, wholesome story. But and you don't really get to see. There's like this small reveal of powers at the end that were just really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that one. For like they're waiting in the line and they can't get the tickets, and they're kind of talking about like how would we talk about how we met each other because it's such a ridiculous story. How would you talk to normal people about this?
Yeah,
And it was such a beautiful kind of like I would say the circumstances were extraordinary because that's the only way you meet like an extraordinary person. And it's like yeah, it got me really interested. I don't know what was the characters, but what the one like shifted to like kind of this rainbow and like lifted off the ground flying.
yeah.
And it was I'm definitely curious about them. I'm assuming they're mutants. I should have wrote down their names this one because yeah, I love this one. It was up there for me. Yeah, I just really liked the moment, especially because you got to see other people chatting in line about. So again, you got some like kind of like just everyday people talking as well, contrasted with them, and I don't know, it was nice.
I'm not familiar with Carolina Dean, so I'm going to look her up real quick. Also, briefly known as Lucy in the Sky, or LSD, a fictional super. No wonder she's so trippy and her powers are all tripped out and stuff.
That's awesome.
She was a runaway. She was one of the runaways. Gotcha. Um, she's her parents are some kind of alien race that absorbs solar energy and re-radiates it in the form of colors of the rainbow.
Huh.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it just looked cool, and the characters seem really cool. So yeah.
What do you think about the state of representation in like comics and kind of like comic book media overall?
Uh, I'm assuming. I mean, I guess I'm not super knowledgeable in this, but like, it feels safe to say the little bit I've looked at, like, it's probably not super large outside of some of the characters we're seeing in these books, which was
Yeah.
great. I did like these. These were great books. But it does feel like, you know, it's barely getting started. Almost, it feels like, right. Like, I think some of the appearances you mentioned, going back, like, it's not that long ago. I'm sure part of the my understanding of the Comic Code Authority stuff probably played a role in some of that, not allowing some things on there. Which actually I randomly thought of earlier is kind of interesting. You have the right that the Loki show has started in Pride Month, and there's the TVA, and it's like, is there an allegory for the Comic Code Authority in here?
Maybe so. You can do these certain things you can't do. You can't get off of the status quo kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, it's not enough. Like I can definitely understand. I've seen a couple of people expressing sentiments of like, yeah, this book is great and all, but why not give this character their own series or whatever? And it's like, I get that. Uh,
yeah,
and then but at the same time, unfortunately, we still live under capitalism, and these are corporations that they're not gonna put out a book. Like I think that
yeah,
the most important thing, and I know this is going to sound like shilling, right? But I think it's important to support these books because if we, if people show them overwhelming, look, there is a market for this, there is a demand for this, and tweet at them about your favorite stories from it and the favorite characters that you'd like to see more from. These things can have an effect. We just have to kind of show them that like we need more of this, we need it, and uh,
yeah. Like, obviously, it's not going to fix like things overall, but
no,
it
obviously
gets
not.
jobs for people who have these experiences, who are going to be more likely affected to need that, or and then who knows, that representation empowers someone else, and so it's still
It definitely
something that
like
we can do. So it's
when like just that little anecdote from the writer earlier that I read about, where he said that like having characters that kind of speak to him growing up as a kind of awkward, lonely gay kid was really really important to him, and that was back before it was as okay as it is becoming now to be openly gay. So like you think about that, and how many kids must be coming up now openly gay, but
yeah,
still feeling lonely and still feeling isolated, maybe even more so because they've become out about it and still maybe aren't getting the support that they or maybe even getting a lot of flack for it. So
yeah,
I think the representation is incredibly important, and not just for kids either. I did an interview with Preston Poulter last week. He's got a comic called White Lily about it takes place in World War II. These Polish Jewish lesbians. They're closeted lesbians because you couldn't be out back then. Um, but they're gay, and he sent me a picture yesterday. He's got a booth at a convention right now, I think in Albuquerque. Um, and he sent me a picture of these a pair of middle-aged lesbians who are holding his book. Okay, they came to meet him and get their book signed, and they're
that's
just
awesome.
smiling ear to ear. And it's like, so it's not even just kids. There's like people
Yeah,
who need this representation, and it is a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but we have to create a world where these things are unfortunately we have work to do. I mean, it'd be nice if
right.
people that are bigots would just stop being bigots, but they're not going to in a lot of cases. So yeah, I'd say just supporting these creators, these books, if possible, is a great way to at least tell these companies that are so influential in our media that this is a big part of what you should be doing, not
Mhm.
just like a book every year, put out a pride book in June, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Well, okay, and again, it trickles down to, okay, we see, like, look at the story with Nicole Maines doing the Dreamer comic, right? Like,
yeah,
if they see that, then like that's an amazing story. That's inspiring to me. I mean, even at 38, I still get inspired by some of this, and I'm still figuring out aspects of my identity and stuff. And so like it's really helpful. In fact, I knew it's kind of funny, but it's I could tell like certain characters where it's like I don't know what's going on with this character, but I feel really compelled by this character, and you can kind of tell like there's probably something to this character that I relate to. Like it's probably not a coincidence that like these
Right.
characters stood out to me more. And yeah, and so like I don't know. So it also means that like okay, if that does well and Dreamer does well, and like that means someone like Nicole Maines, who has been basically a real life hero, gets to write more, has more cultural influence. It's good. That's good for us. So yeah, it doesn't fix everything, but it's still important. It's an important aspect.
Yeah. I think this is important, and it it isn't the priority at all, but I think it is important that these perspectives are just included, even if it's not, you know, expressly about being queer or trans or anything like that.
Exactly. Yep.
Having the perspectives involved with other perspectives is just the way the world is.
Yep.
And yeah.
Exactly. It just makes for better creativity. It makes better stories that, you know, everyone wants better stories, right? So,
Right. Everybody,
uh,
we just want good stories. That's all we
so
want.
I mean, yeah, it's a win-win for everyone, not just the stories that have like a you know, queer characters being prominent or something, but like just having those perspectives in the room, even if it's just, you know, a Batman story about Batman, it's still important. It's still going to influence those stories. I have seen some cool stories recently that are either comic book related or kind of adjacent, I guess. That's been nice to see. There was some great representation in Umbrella Academy on the Netflix show that I saw at least, and obviously like She-Ra and Kipo,
Oh,
which I
okay.
guess it's kind of adjacent. Both those, all those had
It counts. Yeah.
various representation. So those were really cool. Yeah, yeah, She-Ra had not only did it have like career relationships, but there was a villain character who is just non-binary, who was like a shapeshifter, who was just, you know, done that way. Like it was really cool. Well done. Keep out some stuff, and yeah, and the Umbrella Academy, both Klaus, yeah, I think that's how I pronounce it. Absolutely fun character. If you enjoy Loki, Klaus is a different kind of self-destructive character, but very fun. I
Okay.
mean, he's one of the good guys. Supposedly, none of the characters are really good guys necessarily
Right.
in that show. It's a very messy show,
Yeah.
but yeah. I mean, that show's got some of my favorite things. Right? You got your messed up family. You got time travel. So but yeah. And one of the characters, right? We have Elliot Page
Yeah.
performing on that show, and his character in the second season, um like the first season is like dating a man, and the second season ends up being like a lesbian. So like that character is clearly going through identity and exploring stuff. So it's got some cool stuff going on.
I haven't watched it yet, but I do know that they like Netflix retroactively changed the credits in the previous seasons too.
Yes, immediately too. Like it was
Which
like they did the announcement and they like immediately did it. That was really
is
cool.
really like that's a once again, none of this is enough, but there's some really positive signs, that
Exactly.
that even soulless corporations are like, okay, we got to do the right thing now. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So it's yeah, and it was actually in a quote when I was doing stuff for Kipo, the writers in there like they really wanted to have like a character, and they made the comment about like we really want him to, you know, be open about it, because like a lot of shows like they might do queer coding or not really whatever, and so like it was cool
yeah,
to hear like they mentioned that, and I guess the producer or whatever was like, we actually insist like if you're gonna have a good character they have to say it,
yeah.
and it's one of those things where like that's really good to see.
Well, like,
Uh,
did you listen to that that ethics episode I sent you?
yes, yes.
Because they talked about like the supernatural show, which I never watched because it's garbage to me. But like, uh, apparently they had written, they were writing the one of the brothers to have like a really friendly kind of relation, like enough of a relationship with another guy to kind of hint at it, but basically they were consciously doing it on the line like that so that they would kind of hook the gay viewers, but also not alienate the bigots or whatever. And like the person that was being interviewed on
Yeah.
that said that's just a really shitty way to do it.
Yeah.
Like that, like you just said, that produce, do it or don't do it. Preferably do it, but don't, like, find a middle ground and try to appease everyone, because that's going to appease no one.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because sometimes they do. I don't know. There are definitely weird moments every now and then where you're like, "What are you doing here? Like, why? Like, I don't know." And actually, I guess that's a decent lead into the Loki show.
yeah,
Because I'm loving the show. But part of the marketing of the show was they made a big thing about the gender stuff, and
well, was it?
oh, well, I don't know. I guess
I mean,
it
what
feels like it was, but maybe that was just people blowing it up more than they tried to push that. I guess.
Okay, so I think what happened, this is what it seems to have happened to me. And in hindsight, yeah, anything Marvel puts out, they have to know people are going to pour over every frame of it. So in that way,
Yeah.
you're right. It must have been a conscious decision. But in one of the or one of the trailers before the show started, there was like a quick flash of his file.
Mhm.
And of course, people, screenshot stuff and look at the details. And that's where someone noticed, oh, it says gender or sex fluid.
Mhm.
And then they started like asking the creators and Tom Hiddleston, and that's when they started speaking about it and stuff, which I imagine
Right.
all of that was probably intentional. Like, let's put this in there,
Yeah.
somebody will spot it, then they'll give us a reason to talk about it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So, like, I guess there is a little bit of. I'm sure I'm probably gonna love the show regardless, but there's definitely an element of. I will say that I will be a little disappointed if they don't do anything with the gender thing because of the interview and stuff like that, where it was kind of like, oh, you should experience that on the show. So like it won't, I'll still love the show, I'm sure.
but
But
it
I'm
would kind
I'm really hoping they do something with it because it feels like you've kind of propped this up a little bit.
of, yeah.
And so
If they don't, it would kind of feel like what I was just talking about with Supernatural, right?
exactly.
Like, it was like you baited us and now you've given us nothing. So
Yeah, it would feel like that a little bit. And so I'm hopeful there. Like I think there's a couple interesting routes they could go. But yeah, because like having Sylvie for what we know right now, I don't think it's enough because it's there was also Loki variants who were just like monsters,
right.
like big So like you can't just be like, oh, it's a girl variant. We've seen.
I saw there's been a little discussion, like in the last episode there was, pretty clear dialogue. Loki flat out said that he's into both men and women. Um and I think,
And she kind of confirmed she was too.
yeah, yeah.
So it was a cool exchange. Yeah.
I think he said a little of both kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very, very casually. And like, at first, I think I told you that at first I was like, oh no, they're gonna be cringe about this, aren't they? But then they just moved on past it like it was nothing, and I think that was the best thing to do. uh you know
Yeah.
that's how two people that are like that would talk about it. They wouldn't, yeah.
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah, let's talk about all the details of being bi. Like,
And make a big deal out of it. Yeah.
yeah.
No, it was very casual. It's a really nice little moment. Yeah, it was really nice.
But
So that part was great.
I saw a YouTube short last night from a channel called Hacks Dogma, and they do really good analysis, for comic book shows and stuff like that. They're like very, very convinced that what's going to end up happening is
I hope they're right.
Sylvie.
Like it's a very exciting idea.
They're saying Sylvie is transgender Loki, like not just like an alternate version who happens to be a female, but used to be a male and has transitioned, and that is the reason they became a variant, right? Like, they are a variant in the
Yeah.
timeline because Loki wasn't supposed to turn into a woman like that, as far as the TVA is concerned. And if that's true, like, I didn't really follow the logic. I don't know if I'd have to listen to it again and kind of think about it, but like, if that turns out to be the case, that would be pretty damn cool. Like,
It
to
would be.
make that kind of statement about, as the TVA being the controlling authority of the status quo and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wasn't sure at first with the theory. I actually immediately pulled up episode 2 to find the clip where they showed the variant Lokis because I remember them having that to see like, hey, does that line up? Because I thought there could be other variant, but I was like, no, they don't. They don't really say for sure. So it's very possible that if the multiverse isn't allowed, that like that these other versions of Lokis or monsters and stuff, they theoretically were showing all Lokis that they had destroyed. And it's funny because I actually did randomly, before I saw that short, I had randomly thought about, oh, maybe Sylvie is trans. But then I saw there's a clip that we haven't seen yet in the show, but it was in
Yeah, I
one of
saw
their
that
like 1
too.
minute clips. Yeah, and it showed her as a girl, like as a kid. But I hadn't considered the fact, well, wait a second. If we put this in context here, like they wouldn't record that for no reason. So if they have a girl, like that means that that moment in history is important. They're not going to just show us a random clip. I don't give Sylvie's history. Most likely, if we see any of Sylvie's history in the show, it's going to be when the TVA comes in. So it's possible that that already transitioned at that point. So that doesn't necessarily rule it out.
Another possibility is that Marvel has a pretty good track record of using fake scenes in ads.
True, true.
So if in fact, I mean, this is kind of a stretch maybe, but like if they really were doing that and they really wanted to keep us off the scent until the surprise is actually revealed,
That's true.
they might do that. Like, oh, let's put just a quick shot of a little girl Loki in there so they don't, but I don't know.
I don't know, but on that, I do have to say that if they're going to do it, and Marvel's been pretty good about their timing and things, the next episode comes out on the last day of Pride. So I think that if we're going to get our gender reveal of some sort of thing, then next episode seems like the place to do it.
God, that would be fucking awesome.
It really would. I'm definitely, my only other hope is that, like, I mentioned to you that, like, another thing I could see is Loki having met Sylvie. Maybe it frees him from this toxic cycle of being stuck in this role. And so maybe there's some shift there. That would be another possibility of getting into the gender stuff, possibly. But I think it'd be much cooler if it was Sylvie, and it's literally like this fascist organization has come down on that. Like, that would be amazing. And absolutely. And she gets to blow it up. Be absolutely incredible.
And that would also presumably be the thing to cause Loki to go, oh shit, I have to really help this person, and like, because they're right, kind of thing. Like that would presumably be what pushes him over the line from, because he's still being selfish. Like he's still acting his own interests and stuff. He hasn't actually started doing anything purely for the right reasons yet.
Yeah. And it would be cool to see too is what we do know is that Sylvie's parents were awesome. Like, we have every reason to believe that her parents were awesome and supporting, and she didn't get to know them long. So it would be totally this outside force, the TVA, coming in and screwing things up.
Wow.
Yeah. Take it. So it'd be really powerful. I think that would be pretty incredible. So like when I saw that short, I kind of thought about it, but not fully. And seeing that was like, oh, that gets me so excited. That would be absolutely amazing.
All right, well, that's what we got. We wanted to take a look at these books and just kind of a broader representation in the comics and comics media. If you have any suggestions for things we should cover, if we missed anything that you think is important, or you just think we're completely wrong, let us know in the comments. My name is Dane. Please subscribe if you're not already. And Willow with the channel Questing Refuge. Willow, how can we find you? Are you working on anything exciting?
Right now I'm doing a kind of a retrospective, I guess, of Final Fantasy IV. I just put out a video on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, talking about Carly and I guess our democracy and the Zapatistas. So if that sounds interesting, I really had a lot of fun making that one.
It is really interesting. Like I was interested just based on the little bit you told me, but then watching, I was like, holy crap, man! Like, there needs to be more discussions about that kind of stuff. Just the even like working out the problems with our ideas for how to progress. You know what I mean? Like it's there's a lot of like assumption that just if we do this thing, then things will be better. And it's like, well, hold on, let's think about how we're going to do that thing, and the details involved and the human aspect. So
yeah,
Zapatistas were really, really cool to learn about. And like, it seems like your audience, I'd like to know more. So
yeah, I'm glad to have an excuse to dive in more. I probably would at some point anyways, just because it's been really fascinating looking at it. But yeah, so I'm excited for that. I'm glad everyone else seemed pretty excited about that too. So
right on. All right, well, thanks for talking with me about it. And happy Pride, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, that's okay. tell you why. He's the best there is. What he does, and what he does, it's fucking fabulous. Fabulous. Wolverine is gay. So gay. And that's okay. Wolverine is gay. On the moon with Cyclops, just being extra gay. Wolverine is gay.